Hey, you're in a court, not in the woods, Tarzan.
I'm a victim of circumstance.
Who you hit?
Look, where are you going with the water?
Oh, my cat's on fire!
How's that, huh? What's the matter with you? Well, here's Tuesday.
Almost everyone is familiar with the screen characters of Curly, Moe, and Larry, and most people know Shemp, Joe Besser, and Curly Joe. These 6 men form the world's most loved comedy team, the Three Stooges. But Moe wasn't always the leader of the group. In fact, when they first started, the boys were almost interchangeable. The development of their screen characters was a slow process of evolution that took many years of refinement.
Do that again. Do that again.
It took. He's wrong.
So this is the way, isn't it?
In the beginning, the Stooges worked for a brilliant vaudeville comedian who essentially created the concept of Stooges. Ted Healy was born Charles Ernest Lee Nash on October 1st, 1896 in Kaufman, Texas. He moved to New York with his parents and grew up planning to pursue a career in business, but was bitten by the showbiz bug early on. He changed his name to Ted Healy and eventually found his niche on Broadway, where he was performing with his first wife, Betty Braun. During the winter of 1922, they were appearing at the Prospect Theater in Brooklyn, where Ted had a visit from a boyhood pal. It was this chance meeting that would forever alter the course of Ted's life and the history of film comedy. That friend was Moe Howard, born Moses Horwitz on June 19, 1897 in Bensonhurst, New York. The Horwitz family was a large one like many families of the time, and Jenny and Solomon had 4 boys, Jack, Irving, Sam, who became Shemp, and Moe, who was the youngest, although that changed 6 years later with the birth of Jerome, whom you might know as Curly. Moe was always fascinated by the theater, and as a young boy, he spent most of his time at the local playhouses. He would watch the same show several times and concentrate on just one performer, a practice which served him well when he entered show business himself.
I was in many films from 1908 to 1911. I must have been in 40 or 50 films. I honed my way into the studio by asking if they wanted me to go for sandwiches.
In 1914, Moe ran away from home to get an acting job on a showboat in Jackson, Mississippi. After working there for 2 seasons, Moe returned home, and several months later, he and his older brother Shemp started a new act called Howard and Howard. They worked the vaudeville circuits, achieving moderate success until the winter of 1922, when Moe discovered that his old friend Ted Healy was headlining at the Prospect Theater. According to Moe, this meeting was essentially the birth of the Stooges.
Well, there's controversy as to who were the first Stooges. I think everybody sort of agrees that Ted Healy was the #1 Stooge, and he was a big vaudeville burlesque-type comedian who was very popular in his day, and he was boyhood friends with Shemp and Moe Howard growing up in the same neighborhood. If you listen to Moe and his family, they sort of think Moe was the first Stooge. If you listen to Shemp and his people, he was the first Stooge. What it seems like in the early years, there were various Stooges floating in and out of the act. As one got married and had children, he left for a little while. Another person would come by and replace him. But basically, it was Ted, Moe, and Shemp, some combination. They picked up Larry after seeing him at a show in Chicago.
Enter Louis Feinberg, better known as Larry Fine.
Larry was born on October the 5th, 1902. He was born in Philadelphia, and the address was 606 South 3rd Street. At that time, my father had a jewelry store at that address, and my parents lived in an apartment above the store.
Larry was the first of 4 children. He was followed by Morris, Philip, who died of influenza in 1919, and the last, his sister Lila.
Jewelers use acid to test gold. And so my father had a bottle with acid in it. I don't remember what kind of acid it was. But Larry, as a little boy, was curious like other little boys, and he put his hand up and he pulled this acid down, and it burned right over here on his arm. He had this very bad acid burn, and he could not use his left hand. He was left-handed. So the doctors suggested learning to play the violin actually as an exercise to practice using the hand. So they didn't know what else to get a youngster of his age to do to use the hand. That's how he began playing the violin.
Music would influence the rest of Larry's life.
He was always an outgoing child. He was always an outgoing person as he grew up. He was active in school, but more in the sense that he was a musician. Larry was studying to be a concert violinist. He played the violin in the school orchestra even when he was in elementary school, and he was an excellent violinist. So most of his early years were spent studying the violin. But he had a need to be funny. This was within, it was born in him, I guess you'd say.
Tarantula shot 5 holes in a divot. Get out of here. Go on.
Larry also loved sports. He tried boxing under the name Kid Roth, but his parents disapproved and he quickly returned to the theater. He worked in dozens of small shows and eventually teamed with his sweetheart Mabel Haney and her sister Loretta for a singing and dancing act which they called the Haney Sisters in Fine. But in 1925, Larry was working as an MC at Fred Mann's Rainbow Gardens in Chicago when he received a once-in-a-lifetime offer.
Ted Healy was working in Chicago with Shemp and Mo Howard, who were his stooges. I don't recall which one of them, I think it was Shemp, who went to see the show. And he came back and told Ted, I saw someone that I think would fit into our act very well.
So Healy said, would you like to be one of the stooges, make 3 out of the 2, you know? And he said, yes, I'd love that. He says, okay, I'll give you $90 a week. Fine. He said, I'll give you an extra 10 if you throw that fiddle away.
In that same year of 1925, Mo married Helen Schoenberger, and shortly afterwards, Shemp married Gertrude Frank, whose nickname was Babe. The 4 boys worked the vaudeville circuit until Ted and Shemp left to join a Broadway show called A Night in Spain. During this period, Larry married Mabel Haney, and eventually he and Mo rejoined Ted and Shemp in the Broadway show A Night in Venice, which became a hit. This paved the way for better bookings and eventually an appearance at the prestigious Palace Theater on Broadway. A talent scout from Fox Studios hired them for Rube Goldberg's feature Soup to Nuts. Healy was making over $1,000 a week, while the Stooges' salary remained at the usual $100.
See, the Stooges were my father's employees, and they came as an act, and he was the one that was paid, and he paid them. And this caused a lot of friction, especially with Moe, because he was a better businessman than probably any one of the other four were.
They didn't care for the pay inequity, but in their eyes, it was a shot at the big time. Unfortunately, the film only received lukewarm reviews, but the Stooges received high praise for their performance. Fox studio heads noticed the great reviews for the boys and offered them a solo contract. But when Ted caught wind of the deal, he immediately went to the Fox brass and forced them to withdraw the offer. In his eyes, they were breaking up his act, and after all, they were his employees. So when the Stooges learned that the deal was off, they decided to strike out on their own.
Three boys left Ted Healy because they were offered more money in the RKO Orpheum circuit. How much, I don't know. So he needed three replacements. They couldn't use the name of Healy Stooges, of the Three Stooges. So they called themselves Howard, Fine and Howard, Shemp, Moe, and Larry. Now, Ted's got an audition of Stooges. Now, I never saw that type of comedy before. You hit each other, poke your eyes. I never saw that. I never saw their act till I got an audition. I went on the audition, and I went up to say hello to Ted. He gave me a bang in the head you never saw in your life, and I got so mad. I jumped on him, bit his ear, grabbed his nose, hit him back. He says, "You're hired. Get in the corner." You know why he did that? Get the reaction from you. That was the whole thing.
Ted had his new Stooges performing material that was identical to what Moe, Larry, and Shemp had done.
What are you, wise guy? What are you getting? Wait a minute! Let me see you make a hot fist. Let me see you make a hot fist. Wait a minute! Pay me the $50,000, I'll foreclose this mortgage, you mouse! I won't pay it. Pay me the $50,000, I'll foreclose this mortgage, you mouse! I won't pay it. Don't get excited, answer the mortgage. Pay me the $50,000 or I'll foreclose. I won't pay it. For goodness sakes, pay him the money!
So he was good to work for. When he was not drinking, boy, he was a college graduate, you know. Went to college, Ted did. And he always was a good actor, but he developed to be a great personality. He was the closest thing as far as telling jokes, but as far as personality, the closest thing I ever seen to Jolson.
See, he was the first person that ever played comedy off of somebody else. Up to his point in time, comedy was always a Charlie Chaplin or Harold Lloyd type thing where some guy was funny and he was the whole show. And he played off somebody else with the Stooges.
When I first with Ted Healy, I used to go to bed at night and I saw hands. I saw his hands and fingers one night in my sleep. That's all I saw with rehearsals, whacking and banging and all. You know the first joke I ever did with Ted Healy? He said, "What time is it?" I said, 1 o'clock. He went, "Bung." I said, "I'm glad it ain't 12. You know, that was the first joke I did.
Ted was touring with his new Stooges, but Howard, Fine and Howard were creating comedy of their own.
Supposedly, Shemp came up with the eye poke during a card game in which Larry beat him or something, and he was mad, and he just hauled off and poked him right in the eye, and Moe thought it was so funny that he fell out of his chair laughing and said, "That's going to stay in the act." And that was probably one of the few things that the Stooges actually invented themselves. All the other things, the pie fights and the slapping and all that, had been done for many years before.
Even though Ted had his new Stooges, the chemistry just wasn't the same, and he continued to press the original Stooges into returning.
I think the reason he hired us when the Three Stooges, it was for revenge for the three guys to see that they can be replaced. Not saying we are as good, which I don't think we were, but it was his mind that he knew we weren't as good. And finally, thank God, we went to Ted and said, "Ted, we like to do our own act." He didn't fire us. And about 2 weeks later, we were rehearsing, we walked down Broadway, and I see Ted with the three guys.
On a promise to avoid drinking, Ted won the Stooges back, but again, change was waiting in the wings. Shemp decided he wanted to leave the Healy act for good.
Apparently his wife did not like Ted Healy, and there's some various stories floating around, some pranks that Healy pulled that Shemp and his wife didn't take too kindly to, and eventually Shemp just went out on his own. He'd had a very successful career on his own, but I don't think he made the kind of money that the Stooges ultimately made at Columbia.
In 1932, Shemp got the opportunity to play the character Nobby in Joe Palooka pictures on the coast. And it seemed like a great opportunity for Shemp. And he was reluctant about leaving. He said, well, what are you going to do for a third man? I said, Shemp, don't worry about that. Grab your opportunity and we'll get the kid brother Curly in. And Curly was working with a band called Orville Knapp and his band. He was a comedy guest conductor. And it got a big laugh. So we got in touch with Curly and said, give your man 2 weeks' notice. Come on, you're going to join with us. Of course, Shemp had the long hair, you know, he used to push it back over his ears, and Larry had the wild hair, I had the bangs, and he had brown, wavy hair and a mustache, a wax-tipped mustache. And he said, well, don't worry about how I wear my hair, I'll be back here in a half hour. And he was, and he wore a cap. When he took the cap off, he was as bald as a cue ball. Looked like a naked eggplant.
So Babe was rechristened Curly. It took a while, but when he hit his stride, Curly became the most loved and the best-known stooge. In 1933, Ted Healy and the boys signed a film contract with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. The boys had finally hit the big time. In their 1 year at MGM, they appeared in 6 feature pictures with big stars like Clark Gable, Joan Crawford, even Laurel and Hardy. And they also starred in a series of 5 two-reel short subjects, some of which were written as wraparounds for elaborate MGM dance numbers that were filmed but never used. They even filmed 2 of their shorts in a special format.
They did a couple shorts that were in a experimental, I think it's called a 2-strip Technicolor, and I'm not a real technical guy. But it was a very early form of Technicolor that they were experimenting with, and it's kind of lousy-looking color, but it's color, and it's from 1933. It's very unusual.
The feature films and short subjects were well received by the public, but the Stooges' relationship with Ted once again began to deteriorate.
Their complaint was 2 things. 1, that he drank too much, and 2, that he didn't give him enough money. And I think the latter was really the problem.
I think primarily because A, of his drinking, and B, because of the inequity in the pay scale. The Stooges were getting a lot of the laughs, but they weren't getting any of the money. And I think they felt that they could be just as good without him and make a lot more money. And they had to deal with a lot of his stuff. He was drunk a lot of the time. And ultimately, they just decided to go on their own.
So Ted stayed with MGM, and the boys set out as a trio. It was decided that Moe would handle the business affairs, essentially stepping into the Healy role.
Off-screen, he was very much like what he was like on-screen. Not that he was mean and nasty, but he was clearly the leader of the group. He was probably the one who made most of the financial decisions and arranged a lot of the bookings and things like that and decided what was best for the team. It seemed like he was the one who had the biggest say.
Moe landed a 1-film deal at Columbia Pictures, and if the results were favorable, the studio would offer them a long-term contract. So the boys co-starred with Marjorie White in a 20-minute rhyming short subject called Woman Haters. As soon as they finished, they began writing a treatment for another comedy called A Symphony of Punches, which they presented to the studio heads, who were so impressed that the boys were given a 7-year contract with yearly options. A Symphony of Punches was retitled Punch Drunks and became their second short. But more importantly, Howard, Fine, and Howard finally received the billing that would stay with them forever. They became the Three Stooges.
We did nine films a year, and we had, under the contract, we did those in 40 weeks. We had 12 weeks off, in which we did personal appearances.
The Stooges evolved into very specific characters.
The whole Larry impersonation that I do is, it's a product of watching the Stooges for so many years, so many times, having everything memorized perfectly. And one day, there was just nothing left to like about them. There was no more surprises. You knew it so well. So I began to watch it in a different way. I would just turn on the TV and I would just watch one thing and one thing only. I would pay no attention to Moe and Curly, because that's where usually the attention was. They'd get into a fight and Moe would do a number on Curly. Meanwhile, no one ever can say that they watched what Larry was doing all this time. And I began to look at the faces he made and the things that he said. Like when Moe was beating on Curly, you were just watching them. But if you took the time to look at the other side of the screen, you'd see, you know, and I began watching that. And then I began paying attention to his voice. And I realized that how much Larry was like the Keith Richard of the Stooges. You know what I mean? It's like without Larry, they wouldn't have had any kind of relationship. It would just be here all the time, and nothing like setting little blazes here and there, like when Moe would climb a ladder and you knew he was going to fall and break his ass. But the one little thing Larry would say before it all happened, and you knew it was going to happen, he'd go, "Be careful, Moe," you know. And it just, to me, that was bedlam. That was like the thing that lit the comic fuse.
Larry with the bushy hair, he was, you see, he couldn't talk tough to me because that would be the wrong thing to do. You'd have belt in the mouth anyhow if you did. And Curly was just that simp, you know. He was just big enough and strong enough that anything I said or did, he could break me in half. But his only retaliation was, woo! Every time I went in a personal appearance in the theater, every time I smacked Curly, somebody else holler, "Hit him back, Curly, hit him back." And they throw carmels at me and everything else. You know, if we were going through a scene and he'd forget his words for a moment, you know, rather than get stunned or pale and stop, you never knew what he was going to do. On one occasion, he'd go down to the floor and spin around like a top till he remembered what he had to say.
Curly's wild expressions and childlike mannerisms made him the favorite stooge, but off camera he could be very private and shy. He was born on October 22nd, 1903, 6 years younger than his brother Moe.
My father thought a lot of Moe, and in some ways, Moe was maybe a surrogate father. My father was the baby of the family. There were 5 boys. Moe was not the oldest, but he was the oldest, you know, of course he was older than my father. And I feel that, well, Moe gave him the nickname Babe. And there was a special bond, and there was a special bond.
When Curly was 13, he accidentally shot himself in the ankle while hunting, and he nearly bled to death. It was Moe who rushed him to the hospital, saving his life. However, the injury left Curly with a noticeable limp, and this would trouble him throughout his career. When Curly was with his brothers or his close friends, he became the life of the party. He sang, danced, and played instruments, but if his gang wasn't around, he felt uncomfortable and would simply turn inward. When he became a star, he started to overindulge himself.
I saw him at a couple of clubs in New York, and he danced every dance, and between dances he was drinking. Never stopped. He lived the life of 3 men.
Curly was always slipping money to me. That was his way of treating me well. He'd always slip a quarter to me. "Here, kid, go buy something," you know? Or he'd go out with me and buy me something. He was always doing that to me.
He apparently had a very sad lifestyle, sort of a lonely person, loved dogs. Every time he went on the road and came home with a new dog. But his personal life was somewhat sad in that he was remarried, you know, 4 times. And never seemed to find the right girl.
Curly was nothing. He just disappeared. He was really shy. He would blush when you talked to him. I don't think he said one word to me out of script, you know. I mean, when we weren't on camera. He said his dialogue and whatever he had to say and do, and the minute they said cut, he disappeared.
Although his private life was troubled, his work with Moe and Larry was unparalleled.
He seemed to be the center of interest. I mean, they all worked together, but to me, I think he was the most delightful. The way he looked, and just make you laugh. But I think Moe and Larry, they just worked like teamwork. I mean, it wasn't guesswork with them. They practiced, they knew exactly what they were doing, and it came across.
They didn't do any writing. Usually they were, they had writers that wrote the scripts for them, but there was a lot of leeway in the scripts. Not that everything they did was ad-libbed, but there might be a part where it just would say Stooges do their thing, and then a few minutes of mayhem would ensue with, with all this stuff. So there was some room for them to maneuver, and I'm sure they had such a working relationship with the producers and directors that if something just wasn't coming out right, they changed it around to make it funny.
Take off your hat. Now raise your right hand. Now place your left hand here. Take off your hat. Raise your right hand. Now put your left hand here. Please take off your hat. Raise your right hand. Now put your left hand here. Will you please take off your hat? Raise your right hand. Now put your left hand here. Take off your hat. Raise your right hand. Will you get rid of that hat? Raise your right hand. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Huh? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Are you trying to give me the double talk?
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Why don't you answer him?
He's talking pig Latin. I don't know what he's saying.
He's asking you if you swear...
No, but I know all the words.
The Stooges' roughhouse style of comedy often left them open to injury.
Moe was supposed to be a paper hanger, I think, at the time. And he was up on the wood, the planks and everything else. And it's supposed to break in a certain way, and he was supposed to fall in a certain way, and it fell the wrong way, and he broke his ribs. And it's in, I forget which picture was in, and they cut right there. And he was out for about a week or so, and then they brought it back in again. But when you saw the thing, when he fell, you could see the face that he made, that he really cracked his ribs. You could see if you look for it.
According to Lila Budnick, Larry's face was calloused on the one side where Moe slapped him. His left cheek was always raw and calloused because Moe was slapping him with the right hand across his left cheek.
His little jaw was like the back of your heel. That's how tough it was. You could hit Larry across the jaw, I don't think he would ever felt it. He was that calloused. From constantly being hit, it was nothing but constantly, day after day being hit. But he was used to it.
In December of 1937, Moe, Larry, and Curly were on their way to an appearance in Boston when they received word that their old friend and partner, Ted Healy, had died.
There's a lot of controversy over the way he died. He was supposedly involved in a barroom brawl. The circumstances surrounding the brawl and who were the participants in the brawl are still subject of conjecture to this day. But after this brawl, he supposedly went back to his hotel room and was found dead there the next day. And it was only maybe 3-4 days after the birth of his first child. So it was a very sad set of circumstances.
Ted is not what they think he is, what they write about. He was a nice man. Only bad thing, he was a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. When he drank, he was Mr. Hyde. It's too bad. We lost a great talent when he died at the age of 41. He was, I don't care, he was a genius. One for him would be those Stooges.
And he would drag me on the stage, force me to sing on stage, and I was never more than a foot away from him when we were on the road. And of course, when he died, I was heartbroken because I loved him dearly.
They had a stormy relationship, but they were boyhood friends with him. I think there was always a place in their hearts for him. They liked him. They were friends with him. But he just, went a little too far, and they really had no choice but to leave him. When they found out he passed away, I think they were truly upset, and they were, they were shocked, obviously, number one, but I think they were very upset because although they did have a stormy relationship, they had known him for a long time. They were friends with him.
I've thought about many times the fact that he's the one that started it all, and without him there would have been no Stooges. And the fact that he was celebrating my birth, which caused his death, of course, is highly unusual. It's very strange.
Three Stooges comedies often incorporated contemporary events into the plots. During World War II, they were one of the first teams to parody Hitler in their two shorts, You Nasty Spy and I'll Never Heil Again. Curly, Moe, and Larry were Jewish, and these films reflected a political statement as well as a personal one.
Well, he was quite upset about it, naturally. I mean, anyone who cared about people was upset. And then you have to remember, we're Jewish, and so the war in Germany and what went on in Germany before the war with Hitler and all was extremely upsetting to all of us. I think when he was younger, when he wasn't one of the Stooges, and he was playing in vaudeville in the little acts in small towns, he was given a hard time in some small towns where they put him in bathrooms to dress, or they wouldn't let him, you know, go outside and dress in the backyard or something, or, you know, get that little Jew out of here. But listen, you hear that today. So it doesn't surprise you. The only difference is that 50 or 60 years ago, you kept your mouth shut. Today, you don't.
The Stooge comedies were more popular than ever, but Curly's health was beginning to deteriorate.
Curly hadn't been well. None of us realized just what was wrong with him. We know now that he'd had a couple of slight strokes. And Three Little Pirates was sometime after he'd had those strokes, but from time to time, he became almost his old self. And in Three Little Pirates, he was, in my opinion, excellent. He had recovered. We had high hopes that he would be perfectly all right, but as we now know, he wasn't. And on the very next picture, he folded up. He had a stroke that disabled him.
The stress of Curly's personal life began to take an obvious toll. He had been married 4 times, drank too much, suffered from high blood pressure, and was rapidly gaining weight. In May of 1946, Curly's hard living caught up with him, and he suffered a paralyzing stroke on the set of Half-Wit's Holiday, and he was forced to retire from the act. Moe hoped that after some rest, Curly would be able to return. So in the meantime, he convinced his older brother Shemp to rejoin the group.
Well, he fit right into the act because he had been the original Third Stooge, so there was no problem in that sense. From the general public standpoint, I know today people think that he was a weak replacement for Curly, but those are the people that don't know he was the original Stooge. I think a lot of people also think Shemp was trying to imitate Curly, and he was really not in any way. He just did his own thing, which was nothing really like what Curly did. And I think the people that really don't know the history of it are the ones that really don't like Shemp all that much. The real fans understand that Shemp was perhaps the leader of the Stooges at the beginning, and when he came back to replace Curly, he fit in perfectly with the boys.
Columbia was hesitant to use Shemp because of his close resemblance to Moe, but ultimately the Stooges won the point. Shemp's experience made him the obvious choice.
He was in 100 or more films on his own between 33, 34, and 46. During that 13-year period, he was probably in 90 or 100 films on his own. He had his own series of which he was the star at Columbia, where there were several. It was the Shemp Howard series, and you know he was the head Stooge, and the other people were the knuckleheads.
Shemp Howard had been born Samuel Horwitz on March 17, 1895. According to Moe, their mother had a very thick accent, and when she called out for her son Sam, it came out sounding like Shem. When his brothers took to calling him Shemp, the name stuck.
Shemp was the most darling man I've ever known. He also was kind to me as a child, because you have to remember the original group was Larry, Moe, and Shemp.
He knocked me out when he was serious. That's when he was scared to death of his own shadow. Walked down the street, he's always looking back, see if there's anybody following him. And when he'd go in the hotel room, he'd lock the doors and put chairs by it so nobody could get in, lock the windows. Always waking up, see if anybody's there. You know, he's scared. He's that type of guy. That's why he's always walking around that way to town. He was that way, you know. That was his character.
Off camera, he was a warm, loving, laid-back family man, and he preferred to spend his time playing with his son Mort or watching the fights. But on screen, he had a character that was wild and unpredictable.
double-crosser. Oh. Oh.
Wise guy, this time I'll close you. Oh, no. I'm sorry, Mo.
Oh, think nothing of it.
Oh, gee, thanks.
You're welcome.
In 1947, Curly was still partially paralyzed but feeling better. He made a small cameo appearance with a full head of hair in the short Hold That Lion. It was the only time that the three Howard brothers appeared on screen together, but according to Larry, Curly was set to make another appearance in the 1949 short Malice in the Palace. The scene was shot, but wasn't used in the final print. His health was still fragile, but during this time, Curly finally found what he was looking for. On July 31st, 1947, he married a beautiful young woman named Valerie Newman. They had a baby girl named Janie, and for the first time in his life, Curly was truly content.
They got married in 1947, and he died in 1952. They had a good marriage, and they seemed to have a lot of good times together. Unfortunately, into the marriage that he got, strokes and became sick after I was born. She would want him at home as much as possible. But he wasn't, from my viewpoint or what my mother expressed, at least in parts of the marriage, an invalid or anything like this. He, at this time in his life, enjoyed a family and seemed to have a certain peace and contentment, and he found his niche of being the family man, which is probably what he wasn't at an earlier period in his life. I don't remember stories, but I remember bottom lines and what my father meant to my mother, and to me, that what she expressed was that he was deeper than a comedy clown. That not only was he a genius in his own, but he had a lot more depth than a lot of people realize. Then he took his job seriously. He loved an audience, but he worked at making it look effortless. I think he found something he loved, and he felt good about doing it, and he found something that brought him happiness. One of the things that my mother told me was, he told her, I hope Janie in life does what makes her happy, because I have found what makes me happy, and that is the most important thing in the world, to do what makes you happy. I think the worst part is that he didn't live long enough that I could have known him as an adult and asked the questions that I would like to know as an adult about how he felt about different things. But it feels good, and I'm very proud of my heritage. And I think the older you get, the more family means to you.
Curly had several more strokes, and on January 18, 1952, Curly Howard, brother, father, and stooge died. Although distraught over Curly's passing, Moe, Larry, and Shemp continued to make two-reel comedies. They even found time for live television.
Got to get rid of these executives. They're absolutely driving me crazy. I've got to get rid of them. That's a sandbag. That's dangerous, you know that? That could kill someone. May I be forgiven for the thought which is running right through my... Oh, gentlemen.
Yes?
I mean, now that you're here from the East and all, would you do something for my audience? Would you sing? Would you sing?
We'd love to.
You would, eh?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Well, I sing.
I'll take the barrier. No. You're going to take the barrier.
Boys, here, wait, look, boys. Look here, just stand here. Stand right around the inkwell here, just like that. Now, wait a minute. Now, you don't have to strike a note. Would you play some executive music, please?
When you wore a tulip, a sweet yellow tulip, and I wore a big red rose. When you caressed me, 'twas that heaven blessed me, what a blessing. No one shining down.
No. Don't dance out of this position, boy. Just sing like that.
When you wore a tulip, a sweet yellow tulip, and I wore a big red rose. When you caressed me with that hair and left me on a blessing, no one knows. You made like Jerry when you called me dearie, was down where the bluegrass grows. Your lips were sweeter than tulip when you wore a tulip, and I wore a big rose. I met her in my garden in an old Kentucky town. The moon was shining down. She wore a gingham gown. I kissed her as I placed a yellow tulip in her hair. Upon your coat you pinned a rose so rare. And you wore a tulip, a sweet yellow tulip, and I wore a big red rose. When you caressed me, and never touched me on a blessing, no one knows. When you called me dearie, was down where the bluegrass grows. Your lips were sweeter than tulip, where you...
For many years, they were the top-grossing short subject series in Hollywood, and they won, the Laurel Awards and these other awards every year that were given by the theater owners to the top-grossing film. So they brought in a lot of money for Columbia over the years.
Unfortunately, the major studios were slowly beginning to phase out short subjects. Less time and effort went into the scripts and production, and as a result, the end product was sometimes inferior. Moe was hoping he could get Columbia to put the Stooges into another feature picture, but before anything could be planned, fate struck another crushing blow. On November 23, 1955, Shemp was coming home from an evening at the fights.
The other guys in the car started smelling something burning, and Shemp's head had slumped down on his chest, and the cigar was burning his lapel or something. And he looked back, and, he was dead.
Shemp had a massive heart attack and died instantly. Moe was grief-stricken. He had lost 2 of his brothers in a 3-year period and seriously considered disbanding the act, but both he and Larry were still under contract to Columbia.
They made 4 more shorts with Joe Palma doubling for Shemp, and by shooting him from the rear and having him hunch over because he was a little too tall, they were sort of able to pull it off. But they did what they had to do. Like I say, they were professionals. They were from the Show Must Go On school, and they went on without missing a beat.
Moe thought about continuing the act as the 2 Stooges, but studio heads dismissed the idea. He had to find another third Stooge. Joe Besser was born on August 12, 1907. He was popular in his own right, having worked with stars like Olsen and Johnson and Abbott and Costello, and he even had his own series of films at Columbia. So Moe approached him, and he agreed to be a Stooge.
Moe and Larry, they were the best. I enjoyed every minute of it with them. In fact, I'll show you how wonderful they were. I never liked to be hit with anything. And Larry used to say to me, "Don't worry, Joe, I'll take it." Now, that's the kind of guys they were.
During 56 and 57, he made 16 shorts with the Stooges, which were then shown during the 57-58 season. In fact, one of them, I think, even went into 59. But at that point, Columbia decided that they were going to close their shorts department. After a 24-year run, the Stooges were sort of out of work.
A lot of people don't know that even though they were successful with their movie career, they never made any money. In all the years that they worked at Columbia Studios, they never got a raise. From day one until the last day that they worked, they made the same salary.
Supposedly, they were just denied entrance to the lot. I mean, they came back to pick some things up, and they told them, you don't have a contract here, get out of here. They didn't have any kind of farewell party for them. they were denied access to the parking lot and everything, which is sort of sad after a 24-year association. Very heartless, but they decided, well, we'll go on tour, because that's the way they had made all their money in the past anyway, was going on tour. But Besser's wife was ill, and he didn't want to travel around the country and leave her, so they were forced to come up with somebody else, and they came up with Joe DeRita. They tried him out, and he worked out. He became Curly Joe, sort of because he looked like Curly, and his name was Joe, so I guess they figured, well, we already had Curly, we already had Joe, we'll call you Curly Joe, and the name stuck.
Joe DeRita was born Joseph Wardell on July 12, 1909 in Philadelphia. Like Joe Besser, DeRita had been a star in vaudeville and burlesque, so he was prepared for the rigors of touring.
They spent, 12, 16, 20 weeks a year on the road doing personal appearance tours, and they would do 3, 4, 5 shows a day. And that's really where they made most of their money.
They did an act that hadn't changed in 35 or 40 years. I knew every line of the show.
Joe was a very charitable person. I want to tell you something about Joe. Larry had a big Lincoln. See, the corporation paid for their cars. Larry had a big Lincoln. Mo liked a sports car. He had a Porsche. And Joe would get maybe a Dodge or a Chevy station wagon. And everybody would wonder why. And I knew why. He told me why. They used to trade in every 2 years, and he would buy the station wagon back. He had a sister in Baltimore, and she was not of any means. And he would buy the station wagon back from the trade-in because he took care of that station wagon. I mean, took care of it. And gave it to his sister every 2 years. That's the kind of person Joe was. I know he took care of his mother. Very charitable man. Very charitable. In fact, to give you ideas of Joe, they would send me for different things, for food or something. I'd say, I'm going out to get a sandwich. Anybody want anything? This one would say yes, this one would say something. And Joe would say, write it down, Nate, and I'll pay at the end of the week. Because Joe took care of the checks and everything. At the end of the week, whatever I spent, he'd say, how much you spent? I said, $36.10. I had it all itemized. He said, it can't be that much, Nate. It's got to be more than that. He says, does that include a tip that you give the people, when you buy them? I said, yeah, Joe, it was everything included. Nate, it can't be $36. You must be mistaken. You forgot to write something down. Write out a check for $50. Here's $50.
In 1958, Columbia Pictures released 78 of the old Curly two-reelers to television, and within 1 year's time, their popularity soared to new heights.
None of them were really aware of it. When they came to Pittsburgh, and their last, the reoccurrence of the popularity after television, they got off the train, because they came by train at that time. I think it was 1959. And they saw all these people at the station. They wondered who the VIP was on the train, not realizing the crowds were for them. They had absolutely no idea of how popular they were.
Joe DeRita brought his own comic style to the act.
Obviously, he had big shoes to fill, but he was a veteran performer, too. It wasn't like he was just a nobody. He wasn't perhaps as well known as Joe Besser was at the time when Besser came in.
Most everything was discussed with Larry and Mo, where they would take something or do something or anything. Not one person made the decision. Then after Joe joined him, Joe was like a junior partner, let's put it that way. And Larry, after a couple of years, said to Mo, this I know, let's make him an even partner. I don't know what the partnership was at that time. Maybe it was 40, 40, and 20. So Mo says, why? We've been for years this way, Why should he get part of the good amount? So Larry says, look, between 20 and 33%, there's not that much difference, Mo. And you're making them feel like he's part of us. Like this, he feels like he's a nothing. He's a drag on it. Let's make him feel. And that's what they did. They made him an even partner. Larry forced it on Mo, because I told you Mo was thrifty. That I didn't say cheap. He was thrifty.
Outside of their working relationship, it was not really a close friendship, because they spent so much time together in their working relationship that they each went their separate ways with their families. They got together on big occasions, but they each had their own families, and they didn't spend that much time at home. so that when they were at home, they wanted to spend as much time as they could with their families. So they did not socialize on a day-to-day basis.
Joe DeRita was a very funny guy. Nobody realizes the sense of humor. And Joe would, like, once in a while say to me, "Hey, Nate, it's very quiet. Let's jazz up the place." I said, "What do you want to do, Joe?" And Joe and I were very friendly. He said, "Let's play cards together." He says, "We'll play gin. You make some dumb moves, and I'll make some dumb moves. You'll see what'll happen." So I'm playing gin, and Larry's looking over my shoulder, and I'll make a dumb move. "Oh, what a stupid move you made, you know." I did it purposely. And then Mo would go over to Joe's and look at his. "Joe, do you know how to play gin? You really know how to play? I don't think you know how to play gin." So Larry would say, "Let me take your hand. I'll show you how to play." And I would go and look at him. Mo would take Joe's hand, and then the two of them would start fighting each other. They would be playing for pennies, 1, 2, and 3, not Ronnie or gin or anything like that. And they would argue like hell. Joe and I would stay in the other room and laugh like hell. He says, "We started something."
The boys were back on top, and the studio that had fired them in 1957 wanted them back, this time for a starring feature picture called Have Rocket, Will Travel.
Extra! Scientists establish visual communication with rocket in flight. History is being made on the proving grounds of the National Space Foundation as scientists prepare for the ultimate total triumph over space. Within a matter of moments, you will, for the first time, see the interior of a space rocket in flight. Here's the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, blast off. And now the wonders of electronic science enable us to see the interior of the rocket. Oh no, what's this? Oh my, not them. Yes, it's the Three Stooges who are making history all right, but laugh history in their first full-length feature motion picture, Have Rocket, Will Travel.
They're throwing things at us! Duck! Try to contact Earth.
No change in their course, huh?
None. They can't control it. The ship's on an automatic course to the planet Venus.
We got contact. Take that down, quick. What's it say? Beep, 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 beep. Get out of here. Hey, the television's on.
You heard about the Sputnik and the Mutnik. Well, here comes the Laughnik, a movie that's a three-stooge riot on a three-stage rocket.
We're landing.
For the first time, the world's craziest comedians are really out of this world.
Or admit it. We did it. Have rocket. We'll travel in space.
You are expected. Enter.
A talking automobile.
I am waiting.
I am Larry. I am Mo. And I am Curly Joe. Take us to your leader. Look. They're the spitting image of us, ain't they?
Oh, they look pretty good for robots.
Hey, they made Mo real ugly, didn't they, Larry?
I don't know. I think he's uglier in person.
Don't miss this hilarious mixture of missiles and mirth as the Three Stooges blast off in the biggest comedy bonanza in years.
The Stooges did several more features between 1960 and 1969, and their last film for Columbia was The Outlaws Is Coming.
The Outlaws is Coming. What a wonderful experience. I think we did that in 1964, 65, I'm not sure. Our first meeting at the Columbia Ranch one morning quite early, and I went into makeup and got on my Western duds and came out in the street, and I saw Larry Fine sitting in a chair, and I think his wife was yelling at him about something. And then actually the guys were very serious off camera, their demeanors. They were really very serious artists in their own way. And I was impressed with how quiet they were in respect to their screen personae. I thought Moe, basically, in talking to him here and there while we were filming, was a kind man and serious, almost professorial in a way. Larry was a warm sort of person and always, had a word for somebody and would always spend time. Joe DeRita was Curly at that time, and he was more gregarious and I think outgoing and communicative. I enjoyed all of them, but I suppose I spent more time talking with Joe because he seemed to want to talk a little more than the others. There were a number of silly, bizarre, wacko things that happened while we were filming The Outlaws Is Coming. As guest villains, we had disc jockeys from all around the country, and Norman Maurer and the Stooges figured that would help promote the movie if they put the disc jockeys in the picture as villains, gave them roles. And so, you can imagine with maybe 20 radio jocks all competing for attention. It was kind of silly and fun. And I think the funniest little incident with the picture that I remember, the main thrust of the plot was that we were trying to save the buffalo. I was the young lawyer from Boston, and I had the same interests, and that's how we got together. But anyway, so we spent the movie trying to save the buffalo. The wrap party at the end of the movie, Moe says, "Okay, everyone's invited to my place in Bel Air for a buffalo barbecue." And that sort of typifies these 3 restless nights. I never really spent much time with him away from the set. People don't do that often in Hollywood. You're doing a series and you spend 18 hours a day with people and you just kind of want to get away from them. I think it's probably more healthful that way. I wanted to go home with the Stooges every night, but they wouldn't let me.
In 1969, Moe, Larry, and Curly Joe started work on a self-produced comedy travelogue series called Kook's Tour. During the last few days of filming the pilot, Larry suffered a major stroke which forced him to retire.
They were able to patch together a 1-hour version of the pilot, which nothing ever happened with. But that was really the end of the Stooges as we know it.
And once he was able to really handle himself, he was able to speak pretty well again, because in the beginning he could not talk. He decided he wanted to go live at the Screen Actors Guild Country House. And he applied to go into that. That's in Woodland Hills. It's a magnificent place. And he moved into that, and he lived there for the last 6 years of his life.
There were a lot of other people that were in the motion picture home too that, he got friendly with, and he befriended other people in Hollywood, Ed Asner, the guy from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and a couple other people, Ted Knight, also from that show. I know that they played shuffleboard together and stuff like that.
It was obvious that Larry couldn't continue, so Moe and Curly Joe contacted their old friend character actor Emil Sitka to assume the role of the middle stooge.
They had played with the idea, and Sitka was supposedly even hired and signed, sealed, and delivered to work on a picture, but things fell through, and that group that would have been Moe, Sitka as the Larry role, and Joe DeRita as the third stooge never materialized as a group on film.
Moe started to work as a solo. He gave interviews, lectured at colleges, and made dozens of TV appearances. And even though Larry was still partially paralyzed, he too was able to appear on local talk shows. He seemed to be doing well when he suffered a second stroke, which further slurred his speech. 2 months later, he had a massive stroke, which put him in a coma. Larry died 2 weeks later on January 24th, 1975. Moe was heartbroken over the news of his old friend's passing, but continued to work even though he developed lung cancer.
They were trying to work on a film as late as '74 with Sitka again, but apparently Sitka kept getting a call, you know, we're going to film next week, we're going to film next week, we're going to film next week, and then Moe died, and that was the end of it.
Moe died May 4th, 1975, just 4 months after Larry. Moe's passing brought an end to the world's longest-running comedy act. Joe Besser continued to work in TV and films and take care of his wife Ernie until his death on March 1st, 1988. Joe DeRita retired from show business and lived happily in North Hollywood with his wife Jean until he passed away on July 3rd, 1993. The Stooges are gone, but their legacy of comic mayhem will make us laugh for generations.
To me, the Stooges weren't based on any kind of reality. As a kid, I even knew that. I liked seeing people get hit in the head with hammers.
Then he smacks him on the head like that.
But I've also been able to create original characters based on the Larry voice, like for cartoons like Ren and Stimpy, where Stimpy the cat is, his voice is very much based on Larry Fine, except it's all jazzed up.
I think the Stooges will be popular long after we're all gone, because they are poking fun at life.
You know, there are some shows that have that effect. Make people laugh and smile and hit each other. I don't know.
Sweetly! Would you play some executive music, please?
When you wore a tulip, a sweet yellow tulip, and I wore a big red rose. When you caressed me, 'twas that heaven blessed me, what a blessing, no one knows. You lay like dearie when you called me dearie, 'twas down where the bluegrass grows. Your lips were sweeter than tulip when you wore a tulip, and I wore a big red rose. I met her in a garden in an old Kentucky town. The moon was shining down.
No! Don't dance out of this position, boy. Just sing like that.
When you wore a tulip, a sweet yellow tulip, and I wore a big red rose. When you caressed me, was that heaven blessed me, what a blessing, no one knows. You made like dearie when you called me.
Wow, 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 wow.